Don't worry, small fry, I got your back.
Hit the button cause I'm trying to get my subs up. I know you feeling this, so hit it with a thumbs up.
An age-old question faced by producers. How do I get my low end right? How do I get my bass to sound clean and fat without sounding like farts? How do my kick and my 808 work together to create a result that is better than the sum of its parts? Have no fear, Henry is here, and I'm going to share with y'all right now some ways that I manage my low end and get it sounding nice and big and fat without it farting and distorting and clipping and breaking our listeners' ears, because we need our listeners to have ears or we're out of a job. Today's t-shirt brought to you by the North Side, and that's the North Side of Atlanta. 2 fingers and a thumb. A lot of talent coming out of the North Side. Don't sleep on it. And I'll put a link to where you can get your own apparel right here. And today's TV background. Some underwater scenes. Oh, nice. Some fish. Good stuff. Good stuff. So my first tip before we even jump into the program and start processing is to make sure you have good monitoring. Good headphones or good speakers that represent the low end really well. I would recommend getting a subwoofer if you have speakers 8 inches or smaller, or some headphones with really good frequency response that goes really low and is very accurate. Because if you can't hear the bass and you can't feel the bass and get a good accurate picture of what's going on down there, it's going to be really hard to mix it in a way that translates well across all mediums, be it phones, in the club, in the car, what have you. So make sure you have good monitoring or none of this is going to matter. All right, let's jump into the beat. So I got a little funk beat here I made with my boy Ace Taylor. I'll go ahead and play it for a second. Not much going on melodically, so the drums, especially the low end, is going to be a big focus of this beat, so I think it's a good example. And I don't have any processing on it right now, so the low end is kind of muddy. That's the point. We're getting into that right now. So work with me here, folks. Calm down. Just calm down. The second tip is going to be simple EQ cutting. And the idea behind this is that the less frequencies that the 808 and the kick share together, the more space each one has to shine, and the more you'll hear each one. I'm going to go ahead and throw a simple EQ on the kick drum. We have all kinds of fancy EQs, but for cutting, you don't need anything fancy when you're just doing subtractive EQ, so I'll just pull up the Stock Logic channel EQ. Speaking of Stock Logic plugins, I made a video of my 5 favorite Stock Logic plugins, and I'll put a link to it right here. Check it out. So I'm just going to solo the kick right now. Nice fat. But it's almost too fat because we got a fat 808 too. There's too much fatness going on. We need less fatness. So I'm just going to steadily bring up the low cut until I feel like it's lost that punch, and then I'm going to bring it back. So we have the punch, but we're eliminating some of the really subby stuff at the bottom that will be fine just being occupied by the 808. See, I'm at 45 and it's still punching pretty hard. Now right around here, I'm hearing it lose. It's losing some of the fun stuff. So we're going to dial it back. I kind of like it right there. I like the gentle curve too, so we still have a little bit of the stuff under 45, but just rolling off these frequencies at the bottom is going to help that not clash with the 808. They're going to live in more harmony, more peace, because isn't that what we want? Peace among instruments, right? Make sure not to solo things too much, because something might sound good in solo, but it might not sound good in the overall mix. So you can solo temporarily, but always check how it sounds in the full mix. And that's even giving me a little more room where I can turn up the kick a little more. Sounding a little better, but it's still pretty muddy. Let's move on to tip number 3, and it's going to be a sampler setting for the 808. We're going to go into the 808. We've got it loaded up into Contact here. So all we're going to do here is raise the attack knob in the sampler to have the 808 start just a little later and give the kick some room to shine in that very first moment when the kick hits. So I'm in Contact. I'm going to come down here to the attack, and you can see if I exaggerate it, you can really hear how the 808 comes in very late. You can see the slope right here is kind of showing us how the 808 is starting low and reaching the maximum volume. All we're really doing here is listening for that bounce, and we're going for that feeling, right? A lot of it is based on feeling. So we want the 808 to kind of be coming back in right when the kick is finishing up. So it's kick 808, kick 808. They're never really hitting at the exact same time. So just play with this attack knob a little bit and get it to where you can really hear that bop and that boom, boom. It's like it's a pocket. You can't really explain it. You got to play around with it. Already that sounds way less muddy. I'm loving it, but we got a couple more tips, so let's move on. I'm gonna go ahead and put this attack back because this next tip is pretty much gonna be doing the same thing. I'm gonna go over here and add a stock Logic compressor to the 808, and we're gonna be using, you guessed it, the sidechain function. Tried and true way of having things not clash with each other. A sidechain normally finds a way into most of my beats. So let's get into it here. I'm going to go up here to sidechain in the top right, and we're going to sidechain it to the kick. As far as the settings go, I like to start with a really high ratio. I'm going to go ahead and just slam it. I want my attack to be instant so that the 808 is ducking out immediately as soon as the kick hits. Threshold, the release, and the makeup gain are kind of the ones you're going to have to go by ear to be able to tell. So let's just start with an instant release so that the 808 comes back immediately. And we'll leave the makeup at 0 and the threshold where it is for now. So that's a lot of gain reduction going on right there. I'm going to raise the threshold. Normally I found between 3 and 6, maybe 7 dB is a good range of reduction. So with the release, if you have a really short kick and the 808 can afford to come back really quickly, you can leave it all the way down. If your kick is a little bit longer or looser, you might want to raise this release up. It's kind of the same with the attack that we did on the sampler in the last tip. We just kind of want to feel that back and forth and feel that right? If you've taken anything away from this video, it's that you should feel that Sometimes I'll lower the ratio. Ratio of a compressor is essentially how aggressively we're compressing the sound. Because this is an instance where they're very powerful low-end frequencies, I like to keep it pretty high, but sometimes going lower, depending on your kick and 808, can sound good also. But nah, I like it higher. Final thing is going to be the makeup gain. Just make sure you bypass, unbypass, bypass, unbypass, so that you know you're maintaining your level of your 808. It's the same loudness, even though we are processing it. So here's with it. Without it. Obviously, it's much louder without it, so we're going to need to give it some makeup gain. Let's bump it up. I'm hearing maybe 3 dB. Maybe 3.5. It's like we took a sponge, we took a whole thing of dish soap, and moving on to my final tip of how to not have your kicks and 808s clash. I'm going to go ahead and turn the compressor off so we can reset, bring the mud back temporarily. And for this last tip, we need everything to be in audio. So if you're lazy like me and you keep everything in MIDI and wreck your computer's processing, go ahead and bounce your tracks to audio and then make sure they're not an annoying bright green color. And this is one people don't talk about a lot. It might take a little bit longer to do, but at the end of the day, you have the most control this way. I'm talking about actually going in and fading the audio itself on the 808 notes. So everywhere that an 808 and a kick hit at the same time, I'm going to basically give it a little fade in on the bass so that it is manually kind of getting out of the way at whatever rate I want it to. So I'm just going to do it for one 4-bar phrase here, and then we can copy it. So I'm grabbing all these now, and I'm going to introduce a little fade in, not that much. And you can really see how much you might need because you can see how long the kick is. So you can really dial it in. You could play with the curve too if you want a fatter fade in or a thinner fade in. If I solo the 808, you can really hear what it's doing. And yes, it is easy to lose some of the punch of the 808 this way as well. So be very careful to not make your track lame when you're trying to make your track clean. So play with the length of the fade in, play with the curve of the fade in, find that feeling, make it feel good. And remember, the more of this you do, the higher you can push your overall beat at the end when you put a limiter on it. But at the same time, the easier it is to lose the feeling and the soul and the bounce and the bop and all that other stuff you want. So like anything, it's about balance. Find the balance that feels good to you, sounds good to you, and you'll be in the clear. Good job. Just a couple bonus tips for you, because why not? We're here. Try listening back to your track in mono. Sum everything in the middle, and you can definitely get a clear picture because generally the low end's already in the middle, but when you put everything in the middle, you can really hear the mud if it's there. The mud is exposed, and you can get out your sponge and you can take care of it. Another one is to move around your studio or bedroom, kitchen, wherever you make beats, and see how the low end sounds from different parts of the room, especially corners, because corners of the room tend to have the most bass buildup. So you might hear something from somewhere else that you didn't hear just by being so used to sitting right in front of your speakers all the time. Another one would be to definitely be careful about your stereo imaging. You definitely want your lowest frequencies, like 100 hertz and below, to be in the middle, or it's going to get muddy real quick if you bring them out. Use an imager, use something to make sure that you're focused and your bass is right there in the middle, and you'll have a lot less problems. And the last thing I would say is just listen to it everywhere. Listen to it in the car. The phone and the laptop speaker tests aren't going to be as good for hearing mud in the low end, of course, because you don't have a lot of bass there. But in a car or in a Bluetooth speaker that has some sub, or if you have access to like a nightclub or something like that, anywhere that has some nice representation in the low end, test it out. As always, you might hear something you didn't hear before, but don't go crazy either. At the end of the day, we got to finish these songs and put them out right. So trust your gut, and you'll have a good time. We're going to have a good time. I hope this video was helpful. Shout out to Small Fry for the suggestion. I love getting suggestions from my community as to what you want me to make videos about. I can't wait to get to the point where I can just make videos that you guys want me to make, because I know they'll be helpful already. And that's all I want to do, really. I want to have some fun, make some music, and hopefully help some people along the way. Thank you for being a part of the journey. And until next time, 3 out.
I'm on the tube, on the tube, on the tube, yeah. I'm on the tube, on the tube, on the tube, whoa. I'm on the tube, on the tube, on the tube, yeah. I'm on the tube, on the tube, on the tube, whoa.